Hello, this is your final lecture of this course. This lecture is really going to pair with the video that you're watching that's from the website called Style Academy. We're going to be talking a little bit about active and passive sentences. Don't worry if you've heard of those terms but you have no idea what you mean. I'll explain a little bit in this video. The following video from Style Academy will explain much more. And they actually have a lot of really helpful videos on that website, Style Academy. So I suggest that if you need a little bit more explanation of what these terms mean and you try the exercises but it's not really going so well, that you watch another video or two from that site, or you can look up a definition of what active or passive voice sentences mean. The reason why that's important is because, as the title of this lecture says, they can help create writing that flows. So we're going to be talking about especially the ways that you arrange sentences in a paragraph, because that's where people really see the breakdown of sentences that don't exactly flow. I've titled this lecture Writing That Flows because I used to work in the Writing Center at UT Austin. It was a pleasure, but I would have lots of people probably having this problem more than anything else, who would have a draft of their paper written, but come in and say, I've written it, I like what it says, but it doesn't really flow very well. And so I have read a book that I really love. I'll show you the book at the end of the lecture, that is about exactly that, writing sentences within a paragraph so that they flow nicely from one sentence to the other, and you can tell what the idea of the paragraph is really easily. So the first principle of writing that flows, we're going to call cohesion, and that means how the sentences, especially how the boundaries, the beginnings and endings of sentences, fit together. So I'm getting all this from a book that I love. It's called Style, The Basics of Clarity and Grace, and it's by Joseph Williams, was later edited by Joseph Bishop. Williams says, sentences are cohesive when the last few words of one set up the information that appears in the first few words of the next. That's what gives our experience of flow. And in fact, that's the biggest reason the passive is in the language, to let us arrange sentences so that they flow from one to the next easily. So you'll see that what the passive can do is rearrange the order of the words, like put the subject after the object, basically. So it will give you more choices about how to order the items in a sentence so that the last few words of one set up the first few words of the next sentence. So I'll go through some examples. These are all taken from the same book, so that's what the page numbers mean. This is an example that Williams provides. It reads, some astonishing questions about the nature of the universe have been raised by scientists studying black holes in space. And let's look especially at this sentence that's underlined. The collapse of a dead star into a point perhaps no larger than a marble creates a black hole. So much matter compressed into so little volume changes the fabric of space around it in puzzling ways. Now, what he wants us to notice here is that at the end of that first sentence, you have questions have been raised by scientists studying black holes in space. Now, the next sentence assumes that the reader doesn't know exactly what a black hole is or needs reminding, but the way that the sentence presents the information causes a reader who's new to this topic to trip up a little bit, because it's the first sentence has ended with black holes in space, and the next sentence starts out, the collapse of a dead star into a point perhaps no larger than a marble creates a black hole. Williams wants us to understand that reversing the order of the information presented in that second sentence, that middle sentence, would make the writing flow better. So he proposes this revision. This first sentence ends with studying black holes in space, and then if you reverse it to say a black hole is, then that lets the reader know, I'm going to explain what black holes are in case you don't know or you've forgotten. So here's just zooming in a little bit on what I just said. The first sentence ends with black holes in space. Then you have the collapse of a dead star into a point. That's how the original second sentence started out. But then you can see black holes in space ends the first sentence, and then the next sentence, it starts with a black hole. So you can see how the boundaries of the sentence, the end of one leads very naturally into the beginning of the next one. And that's the principle of cohesion that we'll be continuing to look at in some more examples. What we're doing here is creating a passive voice sentence. The first example was actually active, and we've made it passive. What makes it passive is the words I've underlined here. A black hole is created by, and the verb is part of what makes it passive. So in a passive sentence, the verb is a to be word, such as is, am, are, was, were. And you can Google to be verbs or helping verbs or auxiliary verbs if you need a refresher on what all of those conjugations of the to be verb in English are. So for example, is one of the most commonly used to be verbs. And then you have a past participle. You don't need to know that word necessarily, but you can see that it almost always ends with an ed, so is created. It's the past form of create. And then you probably have a phrase that begins with by, because whoever is doing that action is displaced into the latter part of the sentence. The action is not being done by the thing in the subject position, which is usually the very beginning of the sentence. So in this sentence, you have some action going on. If you can identify the verb, you can see that the verb is created. And then you want to ask yourself, is the thing or the person in the subject position that's before the verb, is that the thing or the person who's doing this creating? The answer is no. A black hole is not creating anything. A black hole is created by this process that's explained later in the sentence. So again, you might have a by after the verb, but you might not in case that there is no actor or there is no entity that is named as doing the action. But I'm here to tell you that passive voice is okay. And a lot of you probably encountered this in your academic writing because passive voice sentences are used often, especially in the sciences, but also in many other academic fields. And just a reminder, that's what Williams says. The biggest reason that the passive is in the language is to let us rearrange sentences so that the information is in an order that lets us read sentences in a series more easily. So let's look at another uncohesive sentence pair. I'm not sure if uncohesive is actually a word. My dictionary said that it wasn't, but it's the opposite of cohesive. So let's look at this pair of sentences. The basis of our academic democracy, equal opportunity for all, is being threatened by college costs that have been rising fast for the last several years. Increases in family income have been significantly outpaced by increases in tuition at our colleges and universities during that period. So you can get a sense of what this paragraph is going to be about. These are the first two sentences in a paragraph. It's going to be about increasing college costs. This symbol, I've put the unequal symbol there. It's not exactly unequal, but it just means that there's kind of a rough transition from the end of that first sentence into the beginning of the next sentence. So this first sentence ends with threatened by college costs that have been rising for the last several years. So you have college costs rising over a period of time. And then the next sentence currently starts out, increases in family income have been significantly outpaced. So the idea in the last part of that first sentence and then the first idea in the next sentence it's not clear how they are connected. But we can change that next sentence around so that it does connect more smoothly. So the last several years is how the first sentence ends. We can revise the next sentence to say, during that period, which is the last several years, tuition, which is repeated from that first sentence, tuition has significantly outpaced increases in family income. So the family income is put to the end of the sentence instead of beginning it. Let's look at another one. So we go back to that sentence we just looked at. Increases in family income have been significantly outpaced by increases in tuition at our colleges and universities during that period. Only the children of the wealthiest families in our society will be able to afford a college education if this trend continues. So right now, these sentences are not cohesive. The end of that first sentence is talking about a time period, and then the next sentence starts out with only the children of the wealthiest families. Overall, it's about the same topic, but you just don't see the connection very quickly. To revise the next sentence, you could say, if this trend continues, which is referring to the trend that might keep going that the first sentence referred to. So you just rearrange the information, but you have all the same information there. So it could read, if this trend continues, a college education will soon be affordable only by the children of the wealthiest, et cetera, et cetera. Let's look at one more. Knowledge and intellectual skills, in addition to wealth, will divide us as a people when that happens. equal opportunity and the egalitarian basis of our democratic society could be eroded by such a divide. Again, we have the end of the first sentence, will divide us as a people when that happens. The beginning currently is equal opportunity in the egalitarian basis, which is not a clear transition. But we could change it by saying, basically, if this trend continues, which I've put in brackets because I altered the sentence slightly, we will be divided as a people not only by wealth, but by knowledge and intellectual skills. And that phrase, not only but also, is kind of a sophisticated way to compare or add on some elements if you haven't incorporated that in your own writing yet. Such a divide will erode equal opportunity in the egalitarian basis of our democratic society is how it could read. So we end up with this. This is the revised version of the whole paragraph, and I've put in red the transitional phrases that are the main difference that we came up with when we rearranged the elements of these sentences. So when highlighted, you can see that a certain kind of organizational strategy is clear. We have in the last several years, during that period, if this trend continues and when that happens. So these are all talking about a chronological a series of events in time, but also cause and effect. So it's talking about something that seems inevitable now unless we can do something to arrest the process. So I've been talking about cohesion, and you can imagine this as a puzzle where all the boundaries of the puzzle pieces fit together, like the beginnings and the ends of sentences, or the ends and the beginnings of sentences. Next, I want to move on to talk about coherence, which is the picture that you see clearly when certain things are present in sentences. So cohesion is about the boundaries of the puzzle pieces, and coherence is about the picture as a whole. So Williams tells us that writing is coherent within a paragraph, again, when the sentence subjects are related, when they share common themes or ideas, and you can remember this from other high school English classes probably, when the paragraph has one sentence that states what the whole passage is about, or a topic sentence. So he presents this example as an example of an incoherent paragraph. And it's actually about coherence, which is sort of meta commentary. So this paragraph reads, consistent ideas toward the beginning of sentences, especially their subjects, help readers understand what a passage is generally about. A sense of coherence arises when a sequence of topics comprises a narrow set of related ideas, but the context of each sentence is lost by seemingly random shifts of topics. Unfocused, even disorganized paragraphs result when that happens. A lot of stuff is underlined here. It's basically the beginnings of each sentence plus a subject and verb pair in each clause. So this is meant to give you an idea of what subjects and what verbs you have in the passage so that you can decide if you want to bring related subjects to the beginnings of sentences, which makes them easier to spot. In a coherent revision, you can see the underlined subjects. And it's made even better because these subjects are usually flesh and blood people. In this case, they are readers. So Williams has revised this passage so that readers are often in the subject position in the beginning of those sentences, and readers are people that we can imagine doing things rather than abstract concepts. So you can skim over it and see that readers, they see consistent ideas, they, etc. And then a that is in there that's referring to topics. So either readers or topics are consistently what you see at the beginning of sentence subjects. So here's a list of what those sentence subjects have been revised to state, so they are much more consistent and coherent. It's about readers, and this cat is reading. That's why I put that image there. So what you have when you have cohesion between sentences and coherence, which is having similar topics in the subjects of sentences, plus a topic sentence really does a lot to aid coherence, then you have what people refer to as flow. The book that all this comes from is called Style, The Basics of Clarity and Grace. It's gone through many editions. The page numbers I was using were from the 5th edition. You can find this used on Amazon. Any of the previous editions really say basically the same thing. This book has made me a better writer, and it's helped many, many of my students become better writers too. So pick up a copy if you're interested in working on your sentence style, your clarity, and your flow. And that is it. I wish you happy revising in your reflective analysis paper, and that is the last lecture. So you've had quite a journey from the beginning of the the beginning of the semester to the end, and I really look forward to reading about that journey in your reflective analysis papers.